Welcome back, moviegoers, to another edition of Going to the Movies. Today, we're up in Bloomington, Indiana for the Little 500. By the way, I'm Brian.
And I'm Virginia.
And we want to thank you, first of all, for 5,000 subscribers. It's amazing to us that many people would even care about this hobby, but we are so grateful for that. And if you're not subscribed, consider it. We got a lot more awesome filming locations coming up. And today, it's all about Breaking Away, one of the greatest coming-of-age movies ever, one of AFI's top 10 sports movies of all time. Let's get into it. There's a lot to do. First up and first location in the movie is Rooftop Quarry, which is a limestone quarry owned by the Indiana Limestone Company, and it's kind of tricky to get to. They don't like people back there. But I wasn't going to try it unless I knew for sure that there was some of it that still existed. Because in 2018, there was a segment on the local news showing that they filled most of it in, and they did that to keep college students from sneaking back there and going swimming and getting hurt. There's been a lot of injuries and even deaths back there, so I completely understand why they did it. I just wanted to make sure they didn't fill it all the way before I tried to see it. And so with the drone footage, you can see it's still that corner there. They just filled up from, it looks like the highest jump off point to the slanted rock where the cutters would hang out. And now to get back there. So the surrounding woods are pretty overgrown. I found the best entry point that I could. I thought there was going to be somewhat of a trail, so I wore running shorts, and that ended up being a big mistake. My legs were all sliced up from the briars and covered in mud, and it was pretty bad. My main concern was snakes, so luckily I didn't see any of those. As I was navigating through, I became very aware of the loud crunchy noises I was making because you could clearly see into the backyards of a couple of houses at the beginning. I heard a guy working in one of the backyards, so I quickly changed direction to find some more coverage. Oh. I ran into a miniature quarry. I used Google's satellite view as a guide so that I wouldn't get lost, and finally after about 10-15 minutes the path started to clear out and I could see that I was getting close. First I saw the adjacent quarry and I took a quick look, but I didn't want to stop too long there because I was on a mission. And finally, there it was, the last remaining corner of Rooftop Quarry from Breaking Away. One of my holy grail locations for a long time, and I finally made it. I just happened to get this shot matchup by pure luck, but other than that, I knew I wasn't gonna be doing any other matchups. A lot of the filming in the quarry was done on a pontoon boat, and I was not getting into that water. That being said, I did want to get as many vantage points as possible, so I found a trail down. Over this ledge, you could see a fridge with no back on it. Is that the one Dennis Quaid climbed into? I don't know, but let's go do some rock climbing. I couldn't climb over the limestone too much because I really only had one hand to use. My other one was holding the camera, which was dangling off my neck without a lens cap, and I didn't want to damage that, and I didn't know how good the GoPro footage was going to be, so I was more concerned about that camera than climbing around and doing all that. But this is about where Slant Rock was, at least in this direction. I don't know for sure. You can still see it on Google Earth, but that's where all the cutters would hang out. I didn't want to spend too much time out in the open, so I went back around the other way and found some other really cool viewpoints. So here's kind of a halfway point, sort of towards the highest jump, which is now part of the filled in section, but you can see where it used to be. You can see the rocks they pushed into it, and over here is where Slant Rock was. Now finding my way out was even harder. There was a couple of spots where I just had to stand there for a minute to figure out which direction I was going to go in. I had to backtrack a few times, but I eventually got out of there. Now let's get back to town. So we've made it to Lincoln Street, which is part of Dave's neighborhood. This is where we first see him riding on the bicycle after the first quarry scene. So he comes up over the crest of the hill here on his bike. And that corner is where Nancy's house is. Here along this wall is where the kids are playing. And it looks a little bit different today. That house right there was where the lady was shaking out the rug or the sheet. And then he rides past this church down here on the corner.
Presto, bottega, che l'alba già presto. La 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 la.
And now you're probably wondering why I skipped the house with the old lady where she says he was as normal as pumpkin pie. That's because it's not actually right here where it's implied to be in the movie. It's actually a few blocks down that way, right next to Dave's house. So let's go down there. All right guys, so right there on that corner is Dave's house, but I gotta show you this spot real quick. We'll get there. I got this from a tip from Adam from the channel Come See With Me. Make sure to go subscribe to him. We ran into each other making the same video and it was awesome. He's such a great guy. And so I gotta give him a shout out. He told me about this spot. I wouldn't have found it otherwise. And he got the tip from the owner of Dave's house. So right here to the left is the porch where the pumpkin pie lady was. I call her that. She's just an old woman that said Dave used to be as normal as pumpkin pie. His poor parents. Now we're at one of the best locations from the movie. It's an iconic house. The house is so cool looking. We were here a couple of weeks ago and you'll see in that footage that the vines weren't growing out. In only just 2 weeks, it's already covered. So I guess if you want to see what the porch is actually shaped like, come during the right time of year. I think this is a good spot to reiterate. When you go to house locations, make sure you respect the owners. Don't try to go in their yard. Don't try to match up shots that are on their property. It's not cool. I spoke to the owner here. He's a big fan of the movie. He loves when people come and take pictures. They've been doing it for years, but YouTube's a little new to him. He's a little tentative about it. So we don't want to ruin the fun for everyone else. It's like the Home Alone house. Think of it that way. There's a fence up now because too many people disrespected the property and the owners, so don't do that. So right here is where the mailman was kissed by Dave because he was so excited about the Cinzano article. You can see they've taken some of the bricks down and someone inside is playing a drum set. All right, so we're on Walnut and this is where Campus Cars used to be. This is where Dave's dad worked. Tried to sell used cars, wasn't very good at it. Didn't love his job. But it was made much harder because of his son Dave, and that is what we're gonna use to figure out where he used to stand. And I believe it was right about exactly where that building is. The reason I say that is because early in the movie, he's trying to sell a car. Dave comes out of this alley on his bike. You can see that corner of that building there. Later in the movie, he's cleaning a car when he's working for his dad as he's training for the Cinzano Race. And you see this building here to the left as the camera pans over. There are multiple locations listed as where the scene where Cyril comes out and he jogs alongside Dave. They talk about their future as they run up the sidewalk. Where the old Templeton Elementary building was, it's now over here to the left, a newer building. I think what's so hard about nailing this spot down is that there's not really any record online of where the old building stood or any old photos that I could find at least. The basketball court's still kind of in the same area. It looks different than the one that was there during the movie's filming. But if you notice when they're running, they go past about 11 mailboxes. And this is off of a tip kind of from a comment from one of the blog posts, and I believe it was Chaz's blog. It's filmedthere.com. You should definitely check that out if you want to see any great location blogging. But someone mentioned that there's a trailer park across the street, and that's what those mailboxes were for. It's an apartment complex now, but if we look at Google Earth in the 90s, you can see the trailers were still there. And there are 12 buildings. So maybe one of them was the office building. But here's what really gives it away. Once I get farther to this point, you can see those houses on the other side of the playground right behind them. So let's go up closer and see what we can match up. So when we first see them run past, this is the building you see, the chimney right there on this white house. And then the second building's right there with that portion sticking out of the roof. Is that good enough for you guys? Mystery solved? We gotta make sure. Well, I've only spent a couple hours in Bloomington so far, and we are already in love with the place. Just what a beautiful, awesome courthouse square. And in that pan, we've already seen a couple of the locations so far. We've seen the pizza restaurant there. And I want to stop now to look at the courthouse itself because this is where Moocher and Nancy get married. So they meet up down here on the corner, they walk up those stairs. Now sadly, we can't get up close to the statue that's shown. That's because they're working on it. But most of the stuff from that scene we can still match up. And as they head up to the doors right there, we see Dave come across the road. He sees them and he smiles as he's happy. And then he runs a red light on what appears to be that corner, but they actually did a little bit of Hollywood trickery, and he's back at this intersection over here. So we'll go up and match those shots up. So yep, they lied about the locations. When he goes across the stoplight, this is where he cuts his dad off as he runs the red light. And this crosswalk here is where he stops on his bicycle to yell hello to his dad, who's showing off a car to a potential buyer. And it completely ruins that sale. So right here is the pizza restaurant where they hung out a couple times in the movie. I think it was called Pagliai's Pizza. And you can see the front of the building looks completely different than it used to. But everything surrounding it is pretty much the same. So let's look first. Right here, obviously this tree is not the same one, but I think it's in the exact same spot. So that means the guys would have been hanging out right here. And you remember, Mike was leaning up against the tree that was there, eating his slice of pizza, talking about moving to Wyoming or Montana, I forget which. He was looking at a Marlboro ad. They were hanging out here, and then his brother, the cop, came up from this direction, and he said, no more hot rodding on campus. And then there's also a scene that happens later, where Dave is leaning up against what tree would have been here, eating a slice of pizza, and Catherine comes up and basically forgives him for lying to her about being an Italian exchange student. After the scene in the quarry where Dennis Quaid tries to race Rod, they cut to this scene where Moocher and Dave are talking about how Dave's been lying about being a foreign exchange student. They walk down this section of Kirkwood Avenue. They start off up there under the theater. You see them walk past these buildings, and then at the bottom, they turn this corner, and we get that funny line about going to confession. You can see this church in the reflection of the window. Back on Kirkwood Avenue, just off of Indiana's campus, is Nick's English Hut, which is where we see Dave's parents walking in front of as they ponder about his future. His dad very concerned as always. You see the awning in the background, everything still looks the same. It was the same restaurant as in the movie. I'm guessing this is a Bloomington institution. They continue walking in front of what is now a Five Guys, and that's the scene. Just a few blocks over from where the courthouse stands is where I believe Moocher's house used to be. It was the red house. It's been torn down for a really long time, and I think it sat about in this area where this property management building is. The reason I believe that is because this alleyway right here, just to the left, is the same alleyway where they drop Moocher off towards the end of the movie. I'll show you that matchup now. Now, early in the movie, when we see the house from the outside, Nancy's coming over and she knocks on the door. Now she's walking up to the house. You can see this thing on top of that building peeking over. So from those two clues, I'm going to say Moocher's house was right about here. As we continue around downtown in the courthouse square, just right off of it is Bikesmiths, the bike shop that provided all the bicycles for the movie. So we're going to go in and see what they have on display. So right here inside of Bikesmiths, we go up to the counter and you see the Cinzano Race team right here. And then just to the right, here's the coolest thing. They got Dave's jersey up on the wall. The red and green one. From when he got sabotaged by the Italians. Or the Ides, as Dave's dad called them. It's really cool when you come to Bloomington, they have so many bicycle shops. We talked about the love of basketball that Indiana has, but today it's all about the love of cycling here in Bloomington. So I don't really know why, but my dad, I guess he really liked this movie when he was younger, and whenever it was on TV, he would cut it on. So like growing up, I would always see it, bits and pieces, and I didn't know anything about the plot. I just saw a bunch of people riding bicycles in the movie, so that's what I get from it. And a lot of people, when I tell them we're going to make this video, they're like, talk about that bicycle racing movie? But years later, I finally watched it and fell in love with it because it's a crossover of two of my favorite genres, sports movies and coming of age. And I think it's just really relatable to anyone, especially if you've ever lived in a college town. That animosity between the townies and the college students, you just get it, you know? And Bloomington is beautiful. So we were having a great time looking at these locations. Let's go ahead and head to the next spot. Another filming location that's lost to time is the car wash where Moocher works. He punches the clock literally because we don't call Moocher Shorty. He gets mad. It's now apartments blocking what used to be a parking lot and then some buildings back here. There is one shot that we can match up when they approach. These two brick buildings still stand. We're at the stone cutting factory now. We got kind of lucky because there's a farmer's market going on over here. Or they got a Dixieland band playing over there. I'm showing you now what the inside of this factory building looks like. It's the stone cutting factory that Dave's dad goes to visit. It's all emptied out on the inside. Those columns still stand. But all the stuff on the outside we can still match up. So here's a few matchups from when Dave's dad visits the stone cutting factory where he used to work. We're about 30 minutes north of Bloomington off the highway. This cul-de-sac right here actually used to connect to the highway. And this is where Dave gets onto the highway and chases the semi-truck. And he goes up to 60 miles an hour before that semi-driver is pulled over by the police. That was all down this highway, which is much more modern these days. And it hasn't been that long since they disconnected it. I'll show you some street view. I don't remember the exact year, but again, it was recent. Well, because of where the sun is, it's going to be really hard to see it, but this is the starting line from the Cinzano Race, which is another cluster we're going to do. These aren't actually close together, but it's all from the same race. So we're going to do 4 spots from the Cinzano Race. The starting line is up here, and we know that they were facing this way. They're about to come down this hill because it goes down on both sides. Because of the building way back there that still matches from one of the shots. It's in between, if you're trying to find it, Mr. Hibachi and the Circle K. And there's the building that was there when they filmed that scene. So when they make their first right turn, that's here. But I wanted to show you something from here that I think is kind of fascinating. I think you'll like this. That building right there, I'm gonna walk up close to. When they make that right turn, the lens compression makes it so that you see these windows way closer than they actually are. And I think it's interesting. They must have been building this building when they were filming that scene, because there's guys sitting up there next to those chimneys, just hanging out on the roof watching the race. All right, guys, this took us a while to figure out because it looks so different now. And the way the camera was moving, it didn't really make sense until we kind of messed around with our own camera for a little while. But anyways, that little bridge was at the beginning of the shot before they turn across the railroad tracks and almost hit that dog. And Dave's not too far behind the Italian. So they come up this way. The camera pans in this direction. And then as soon as they come up the curve, they cross the train tracks here, it whips up this way. And that is the perspective you get of them going up this hill. And this is the final spot that we're going to from the Cinzano Race. A couple of the spots don't exist anymore. I think there was some blasting done to like where they push them into the ditch and everything. But right here is where the Italians start getting mad because they realize Dave means business. He's actually a really good cyclist and he can hang with the Italians. As they ride around this turn, you see these restaurants behind them, and I'll show you a screenshot to match it up. Best I can do. It's in the middle of the road. Guys, finally my wife is back with me on a shoot. You know, the one before this, she made a little appearance in the Muppet video. She wasn't there for the Scott video. She wasn't there when we did Last of the Mohicans, but she's finally back. You got a Virginia fact for us?
Well, the rocks from the limestone quarry were used in the Empire State Building, according to Dennis Quaid.
According to Dennis Quaid, so we don't know if that's true. 2019 he said that. In 2021 we saw him in concert, the Dennis Quaid band. Wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. It was a good time. So why shouldn't Dennis Quaid have a band, I guess? I don't know. We're talking about the limestone from the actual rooftop quarry that they were swimming in the movie, but who knows if that's true. And we begin the campus cluster over here towards the football stadium. This is where the Cutters first drive up to go mess with the college students. And right here, everything looks different, but it's generally the same. So the tennis courts are still here. They drive up this road. You can see a sign in the screenshot called the Green Lot. It's still called the Green Lot. They still color code it the same way. Well, the sidewalk has changed and the medians in this road has changed, but this is where they run over the Frisbee, the Cutters. The students are throwing Frisbee right out here in this corner. In front of this building, you see the red sculpture in the background. Lands in the road right over here, and they've purposely run over it, making the students very angry. We're right outside of IU's football field, and unfortunately, and I think this was just a few years ago, they have gotten rid of where that hill was that they were sitting on. But if we look through here, that's the press box that you see behind Mike when he's giving his spiel about gonna just keep getting older, not achieving anything. 30-year-old Mike, old meat old man Mike. Not been updated a whole lot since the movie was filmed, but they've closed off the end zones. Should we drone up there? Let's try it. You notice the road is gone, but this is about where Dave was laying down and he sees Kathy for the first time. These two buildings in the background here. Right over here is where Kathy hops on her Vespa and rides off, drops the book, and Dave goes after her. One thing you can still see is this Von Lee building here, which I think is interesting. Same exact sign as in the movie, but the road no longer there. And they both come down and turn right around this greenhouse. And finally, we arrive at her sorority house where he drops off the book and actually meets Catherine, or Kathy, or Katerina. And right up there is the balcony where we see the girls, and then in that window up there is where Katerina was looking out as Dave and Cyril serenaded her from down here on the ground. So right here on this street, we see it the morning after Cyril's beaten up by the college students because they mistakenly think he's the one serenading Kathy at the sorority house. So the four guys come up. This brick building is still here. It looks a lot cleaner now. It's repurposed. There used to be train tracks running along back there at that intersection. That's now a bike trail. But they come up from down there, they cross the street, and then what I think is interesting is we can see these railings. I think they're different railings now, but there was a building that used to be here. I think it was actually a bicycle repair shop. But we see Cyril walk down that way, so he's lower and the other guys are still walking up the sidewalk. It would be pointless for him to do that now because there's a wall here. One other thing you notice in this shot is when they cut to Mike, you can see this intersection back there behind him. This is obviously a very new looking school building. The old one was still there at the time. Once Cyril finally tells Mike what kind of car the guy who beat him up drives, the blue Mercedes, we cut to this scene. The blue Mercedes comes around this corner here, drives up this way, and the Cutters back up and intimidate him just before they head to the student union building. So we're now in the eating area of the Student Union building, and this is where the cutters come in. It's right here was the revolving door that they come through, and they are wanting to cause some trouble because they beat up Cyril, and all that whole fight happens right here. And the bowling alley where they walk through for a few minutes is right in here. It's still laid out exactly the same. I'll show you in there. One of the great lines in the movie, just a random dude standing around right here. It says, "Hi, would you like to roll some balls?" In general, pretty much the same as it was. Amazing. And these were the doors right here that they came through. So far, I really love this campus. We were on Vandy's campus the other day, and I was like, I don't know how great it is, but this one reminds me a lot of Blacksburg for some reason. I think it's because all the architecture is made out of the limestone, and Blacksburg has the Hokie stone, but the whole town is very similar. Just love it. So we're walking up to the Rose Well House, a very old structure on campus here at IU. And this is the scene where Davey admits he's not an exchange student, and he gets slapped in the face, and I think it was 4 takes of real slaps right up against this column. They were both standing about here. And that is what happens here. Beautiful little structure. Now it's really dark, so it's kind of hard to tell which columns they were in between, but it was either this one here or this one here, and I believe it was this one. There was a bench set up right there where Dave is having a really touching moment with his dad, talking about cutting and what he should do with his future. And then they walk off in this direction, where you see these 3 columns in the corner of that building right there. All right, so you guys remember the bowling alley fight scene? That was right inside of that door. You come down the stairs here, and this is where Dave meets the French girl. The final scene in the movie. Standing in an arboretum. Sadly, this is where once stood 10th Street Stadium. It was the track where they raced the Little 500. And we know it was situated about right here because in an old aerial shot we can see the streets, we can see the buildings. It was right here. If that's not enough convincing for you, the library is right there, and you can see it just over the stadium in one of the screenshots. I always thought the shots during the race were really amazing for their time. I found this picture while doing research. You can see how they filmed it. There was a guy driving a motorcycle and just one other guy hanging off the back of it with a movie camera. It's pretty crazy. Other than that little plaza dedicated to the riders of the Little 5 pre-1981, you'd never know that it was held right here. They now race over at Bill Armstrong Stadium, and you have got to go experience it. If you want to see breaking away locations, do it the same weekend as the Little 500 because it's so intense, it's so exciting, and we had such a fun time. Phi Kappa Psi led for the majority of the race, then they wrecked on the last lap. They took out 7 other teams, and they ended up opening up a victory for Phi Delta Theta, and it was amazing.
All right, guys, that's breaking away locations.
Make sure to like and subscribe. We got some big videos coming, so you're going to want to be a part of this. Go watch another video right now. Make sure it's one of ours. We'll see you next time.